The title of our first roundtable today is A Curriculum for the Future. Which skills do we need to teach? According to the World Economic Forum, Education 4.0, we must adapt to equip children with the skills to create a more inclusive, socially cohesive and productive world. And they set out 8 critical characteristics that define high quality learning in the 4th Industrial Revolution. Over the next 55 minutes, we want to explore which skills will be more useful to 21st century students and how they should be taught. Given the speed of technological change, do we think it's possible or desirable to future-proof the curriculum? To discuss these critical questions, it's a great pleasure to welcome this evening's panel of future thinkers. And we have, firstly, Virat Chirania. He is from the Art of Living Foundation in India. Dr. Virat is a TEDx speaker, a global yogi, and a meditation coach. He holds a PhD in emotional intelligence. He quit his corporate career to train young adults on soft skills and mind management. Secondly, we have Naomi Harm of the Innovation Educator Consulting Network. She's also author of The Unique Individual You. Naomi is an EdTech influencer, women in leadership strategist, and entrepreneur. She has a passion and drive for instigating STEM innovation and future-proofing educational leadership in all of her professional learning offerings. And finally, we have TJ Juttla. He is the founder and managing director of QTS, the Quality Teacher Suppliers in the UK. And for those of you on LinkedIn will know him famous for his interviews in The Teacher Point of View. TJ is an educational enthusiast who wants to make an impact on the future of our world and believes that we can do it through making the right changes in education right now. Okay, so to get us started, I'm going to ask each panelist to share an opening statement of up to 3 minutes on their initial thoughts. As the first speaker, I'd like to invite Virat for his opening statement.
Thank you, James. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, fine.
All right. So namaste, and I'm thrilled to be here amongst this August gathering. And I think what we're discussing now is what skills do we need to teach our kids to make them future ready? And I'd like to share 3 top skills according to me. The first one would be meditation. I don't think meditation is a luxury anymore. I think it's a necessity. And there is no too young or too old an age to meditate. I know kids who start meditating at 5 years and 6 years, and what they have, which others might not have, is called intuition, which is a priceless skill to nurture given the uncertainty of the future. So preparing kids to deal with stress, to deal with failure, to handle anxiety, to handle their mind is critical, because if you can win over your mind, you can win over the whole world. So that's the number 1 skill for me. The number 2 skill for me is creative thinking. The future is uncertain. We are in an environment where these kids will grow up and work with technologies which are not born yet. They'll work for companies which don't exist right now. So there is no way you can prep them for a particular job. You have to prep them for a process of thinking, a thought process. You have to train their minds to think on their feet and think differently, laterally, and succeed given the constraints. And for that, we need to teach our kids to innovate. So the first skill was more on intuition. The second skill is more on innovation, given the constraints. And then the third skill, according to me, is intelligence, but not just the age-old take on intelligence, which was primarily intellectual, the IQ. This is the age of emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and cultural intelligence. We're going to have these kids work in very, very diverse environments. So you have the raw material coming in from Africa, something manufactured and assembled in India, marketed and advertised by a US company and finally consumed somewhere in France. And unless we get these kids to understand how to operate in very, very demanding emotional environments and cultural environments and get that intelligence up and running in them, we'll have very smart kids still struggling to succeed in the real world. So those are my top 3 skills. The first one is meditation for intuition. The second one is creative thinking for innovation. And the third one would be emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Virat. And let's continue with Naomi.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen at this time so that you can see some visual literacy aspects that I'd like to share with you today. Well, welcome everyone. We're so thankful that you're here with us today. It's such an exciting topic to talk about where we are leading and nurturing our students for the future. I have some areas I'd like to share with you. I won't touch on each and every one of them until it's appropriate during our forum this morning and this afternoon and evening for many of you. But I'd like to also back up just a little bit to talk about the research and where we're at and how do we prepare our students. So we need to understand our research facts. So because of that, the educational research, what we focus on, especially in the United States, we do use the World Economic Forum. And because of that, it's really giving us a strong indicator that the job loss worldwide will be 40% of those jobs that currently exist will be obsolete by 2030. And if we even look of everything that we've gone through with the pandemic, how our workforce has changed, accommodated, and adapted due to the pandemic, and how some jobs have gone away, and how new types of technology literacy skills have transformed the way that we work. When we also look at job automation, we're also looking at our group of Generation Z and millennial adults. That group of students and young adults, basically from ages 18 to 34, their jobs also will be automated. So what does that mean for them? Well, what it means is that they need to wear a new type of instructional designer hat and how they approach work futuristically. That means they need to continue to be upskilling and lifelong learning. As what Sven was already talking about previous to this conversation, individuals will need to continue to adapt and acquire new skills. It's not that they will be in a position for 30 years as in past generations or even 10 years. It can be that their job will continually transform every 18 to 36 months. And what that looks like is that we need lots of different types of skills to focus on individual to be relevant, to be passionate about their work, and to be successful in their work. So the question would be, how do we prepare our students for this automated 2030 workforce, and what skills are needed? So these are some of the skills that we are focusing on now that are transforming the way that we do work, but also what we do to help teachers understand what that experience is in the classroom. And the skills are very relevant, that it continues on, that we need all kinds of different diverse collaboration experiences to build lifelong learning confidence in our students. We need opportunities of design thinking and problem solving activities for our children. And as you can see, that would delve right into critical thinking and really ignite the creativity within our students for that personalized learning. Yes, it's important that we have computer science, but we need divergent thinkers in order to problem solve, in order to know how to get unstuck. And when they fail, what can I do to pursue and be persistent with finding a new solution? It's imperative moving forward too is the social emotional learning aspect. It's the whole child approach in which that they feel that they have value, and to add their human intellect into the design, the creativity process, and the learning as a global community of learners right within that classroom. A few other things as I close out, but even when we look forward for 2030 to 2040 skills, we need to coach, we need to mentor, we need to guide our students with what does adaptability and flexibility even look like, instead of just an extremely structured educational roadmap for our students. We need to allow our students to be extremely experimental in the classroom. We need to also have the opportunity that kids can pursue and build that resilience, even when they fail or things don't go well, but how they approach their actions to that. Again, just summarizing, the social emotional learning is imperative in which to build a stronger community of learners, and it's all focused on relationships. I'm going to turn it back over to you, James.
Naomi, thank you so much. I think it's a really good point. We know what flexibility looks like now, but what will it look like in 10 or 20 years' time? So finally, TJ, could I ask you for your statement, please?
Yeah, it's really difficult after going after both Virat and Naomi. I mean, like they both nailed it on the head, haven't they? Really. I mean, one of the key things like both of them have mentioned is emotional intelligence. I mean, so for far too long we've always focused on academic intelligence, and actually emotional intelligence nowadays, being empathetic and coming from a place of understanding and coming from a good place and understanding people, like that is so much more important than just like being good at maths, English, science, you know, and doing well in exams. So I think emotional intelligence is something like self-regulation is just so important. Like, and I think it's far more important than just doing well in English, science, and maths, you know. So I think Virat is bang on the money in terms of what he said. So I'm not going to go too much into it. I think the second thing that we really need to focus on is helping children find their purpose. I'm not saying that children need to know exactly what career and what job they need to go into like when they're 16, 17, because I almost feel like we do an injustice by expecting them to go to university and knowing exactly what subject they need to study, go get a 40 grand level of debt and then not get a job at the end of it, right? But I do feel like we have a duty in education to help children find out what their purpose is and what kind of person they are and what is important to them. So they realize in 20, 30 years time, like they've got a place, they need to, like that is where what they can do for society that is going to make society a better place, you know. And I think that's where we kind of let them down. Like we're so like systematic, like as in like we have to do really well in passing our exams, then we have to go to university, then we have to go get a degree, and that is it's just so like regimented, and that is actually completely the opposite of way around that we should be doing things. Like personally for myself, like for a long time I come from a disadvantaged background. I did paper round, I worked at Primark, I was a waiter, I went to university, and actually I didn't have a job at the end of it. And I chased career progression and money for such a long period of time in my life. And I was a hamster on a wheel. Like it didn't matter how much money I earned. It didn't matter how much career progression I got. I just felt like it was never enough. So when I started as a trainee consultant in my previous company, I finally got to director in 5 years' time. Then what was the next step? I started my own company. But then luckily COVID hit. I started following Simon Sinek, and I realized I want people to remember me for something by the time that I leave this earth. And it wasn't to become a millionaire, it was for making a difference to society. And for me, I completely changed my perspective on life. I started working on like the disadvantage and what I could do to like remove that gap between the disadvantage and the advantage. And actually, I felt this sense of purpose in life that I just never had before, you know, and that filled a void that had been there for such a long time in my life. So I think we have a duty in education to really help children find their purpose, find who they are and what they're going to really like do in life that is going to help them feel fulfilled. Because I think there's, like in the Western society, we've just got this massive void that we're always looking to fill. And the final point that I think that we should really focus on that we just don't do is networking. I mean, like the ability to network, in particular for those children that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I'm just saying something that's different from Naomi and Virat. Obviously, I think all of their points were bang on the money, but I'm just trying to say something a little bit different. But networking, I think, is so important. And like, it's not what you know, is who you know, right? It's the most famous saying, and it's so cliche, but advantage like children, it doesn't matter what grades they get, they will always do really well. I mean, like their parents will always be able to help them get into particular jobs or open doors for them. But it's the disadvantaged children that will always get left behind and slip through the cracks. But networking, if you can do that really well, like you will be able to open doors for yourselves that like you just won't be able to create otherwise, you know. And we just let those children like just slip through those cracks. But we teach them how to network, how to like understand financial literacy, like how to save up for a mortgage, tax, all of that sort of stuff, like the basic stuff in the 21st century that is so fundamental to success. I think we can change more lives than we realize.
TJ, thank you very much indeed. Yes, I agree. Finding a purpose, that's so important. So after these initial ideas, we're now ready to set the context of our conversation. In today's fast-moving world, where employment is changing rapidly, as we've heard, and traditional jobs are becoming obsolete, is teaching to a predefined curriculum still relevant? The writer and educationalist Mary Myatt says that curriculum is content structured as narrative over time. So which narrative are we teaching, and which time does it relate to? Naomi, would you like to start us off?
Yes, I would like to start us off. And again, I'll share my screen. I have a few things that I'd like to talk with and share with each of you at this time. I'm going to just continue on where I left off. And when we talk about, is the curriculum at this time even relevant for what we're trying to teach our students to gain and be successful by 2030 and 2040? If we look at the current curriculum, it's pretty stagnant in some areas, but it depends if the curriculum is offered, that it's offering more real world opportunities to connect with experts and to learn from even their previous generation of learners. We need more opportunities for peer coaching that should be taking place from even our students that leave the K through 12 system, that they can come back and help mentor and coach even our students at that high school level. So in order to move on to have things more relevant, we need more of a structure of a curriculum that is infused with the type of learning that excites our students. We don't ask them enough. How do they learn? Where do they learn best? And why do they learn the way they do for them to feel successful, confident, and also to bring about that most curious and curiosity learning moments of time? So because of that, looking at some other research that I've also done with ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, and our Canadian collaborative, we designed and put together 2030 job task and skill cards. And these are really based on how our technology literacy skills are evolving over time based on the exponential growth of what technology has done, even during the pandemic. So these job task cards allow students to wear a new designer hat, but also a hat that is futuristic. Some of these have actually started to come into play in our real world right now. When we talk about 3D designers or artificial intelligence as an architect as part of that. But what does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it look like when I'm in the classroom taking on this type of real job scenario? But what does it look like when I'm in the workforce? So we need more job partnerships, not only with our universities, but also with what we have offered in our world. Students need to experience the realism of what work is and how it's evolving. So again, these are 2030 job task cards. There's 27 learning scenarios, also with the description. So I'll share this in the back channel chat area with you. But when we look at today's students, which you had just mentioned, James, a moment ago, we talk about our Generation Z and our Alpha students and even our Beta students that are coming that aren't even born yet. What I find amazing about this is that our Generation Z students, those that are kiddos from 4th grade on up to high school right now, are really the entrepreneurial generation. They want to be an entrepreneur. The tomorrows.org Speak Up survey also notes that when kids were interviewed and surveyed, 82% of them said they want to own and run their own business someday. If that research is still true today as it was 6 months ago, our curriculum is not valid. We're not even teaching or coaching or preparing our kids what it is to be an entrepreneur. So because of that, our Generation Z students, what I find just so amazing is that they're so empowered to build community and build those relationships amongst their peers. They trust their peers more so than they do as us as adults. And our previous speaker, I loved it when he talked about the relationships, but also the networking. That is spot on. These kids are social entrepreneurs already, and they are driven to change the world because they don't ever want to be in a pandemic ever again. And they are setting it out to create new solutions that we've never seen before. So their thinking and their mindset is so different than what we have. The other thing, when we talk about our Generation Alpha students, these are our littles from 3rd grade down all the way to preschool. These kiddos are really so amazing. They're so technology literate, or even if they haven't had the experience of the technology, everything is a touch and a tactile world to them. They're multifunctional with the sensories that they have. They usually learn through 3. They need first the visual, they need to hear and see, and then they need to touch. So because of that, these are the kids born exclusively of the millennial generation. And what I love about this is that they're not afraid to use the technology or to figure out when I'm in a maker space area, when I'm building, creating, and making. They'll continue to work with each other, converse with each other, and ask questions that we as adults sometimes are a little bit more rigid or drawn back, that we don't want to look like we could fail. But these kiddos are just absolutely amazing, that everything, again, like I said, is touch, and they build and they create. And by the way, here's my little plug. This is my little 7-year-old granddaughter. And why I brought this in is because everything is passion-based learning. She totally loves science, and I want that gift and love for science to continue to follow her for a lifetime. But that means we need to afford each and every one of our children, of every ability, their pursuit of happiness, to follow their dreams of what is their purpose in life, of what they want to pursue to contribute to a greater world of good. Right now, her world is camping. So on weekends, they go camping with their family. Everything comes through, and she loves to build with Legos. So that spatial relationship of how things work and put together, and then to deconstruct and then to debug. So she's interacting and building her world in with everything that she does. The last thing I wanted to say about this, and this can support our curriculum focus, is think futuristically now, that this Generation Alpha, these are their kids from 3rd grade all the way on that are still being born yet. These children will have surgeries by robotic surgeons, and the millennial parents will okay this. That means that they are trusting basically the AI over some of the even doctors and the results that they're getting for their healthcare. And what's so amazing is that Generation Alpha will not have to worry about putting like us as grandparents in a nursing home, because we will have robots in our home that will be our virtual assistants or guides with us to support us to be independent, while our Generation Alpha are going to be the creators of this type of technology to make sure that their nanas and their papas are well taken care of. But this is the type of future thinking. And what is it that we can have them focus on? Being a global solutionist of their futures. And that's where our curriculum should be going. I'll turn it back over to you, James.
Naomi, thank you very much. TJ, do you agree with that?
I mean, Naomi, I think we should definitely link up after this. I mean, it's the first time I've heard Naomi speak, and I'm just so blown away by everything she's saying. I mean, there's a lot that I agree with. I mean, I can't really pinpoint everything she said, but because she's gone through so much and she's so thorough. But there's a level where I absolutely agree. Like, I mean, I've read articles where they basically said 70% of the jobs we do now in 10 years' time will be automated. So where does that leave our current generation that is going through the education system if we're not teaching them how to prepare for change? Because all we're doing is basically preparing them the way that we've always prepared them, how to become like basically academically smart. So Naomi's absolutely bang on the money, you know. I know she's bang on the money in terms of technology. There's one thing that I would say as a counter and playing a little bit of devil's advocate is they've actually been given a really bad hand out this generation, right? Because what a lot of people forget that is like the way that social media releases dopamines is very similar to the way that gambling does, alcohol does, cigarette does, you know, like drugs do. Like it releases a level of dopamine that actually we don't regulate, you know, and all of those things have an age restriction. But social media is given to children from the age of like 10, 11 years old, and they're allowed to go completely wild with it, right? And they have this like this need to constantly want social approval, or like we just don't give them actually this ability to interact with people. And I think that is kind of something that is really, really missing from education, and the way that we kind of allow children to interact. I mean, I've got nephew and nieces that sit with me around the table during dinner, and then they're messaging all their friends. What's crazy about that is when they're with those friends, they're messaging other people. You know, I mean, they're not even in that conversation with those people when they're with them in person. So there is an element that we in our generation, the older generation, that we have this ability to actually talk to people and ask them how they are and interact with them. This current generation is really struggling with that, and I think because of that, they've been given a really bad hand. And I think there's something that we need to do about that to make sure that they continue to be human beings. There's a reason why most of the jobs will be automated in 10 years' time, is because we don't really actually interact as human beings anymore. You know, like that is what we're missing in our current, like in our future generation. And I think we have a duty in education to make sure that we are making sure that they are still human beings, and they come from a place of love, understanding, compassion, like as in looking after each other. But Naomi made a really good point in terms of entrepreneurship. I mean, I read an article by Forbes a few weeks ago, and they said there'll be 75 million new businesses, new home-based businesses, like, and we don't teach like any of our children entrepreneurship. I did a business management degree, and there was not one module that taught me about entrepreneurship, to the point where I actually left university because I just felt it wasn't for me. I went 40 grand debt and I didn't get a job at the end of it. You know, I mean, like, we don't teach people how to become leaders. There's a lot of head teachers that are in our education system that are people in power, but not leaders. You know, like they're not ones that create a vision and like take people on a journey with them, like our parents, our students, our staff. We don't take them on a journey with us. We actually just tell them what to do, and it's a dictatorship. I mean, that is not leadership. That's people in power, you know. And I think that's something that we need to change in the future. I mean, Naomi's bang on the money. We want people that are problem solvers and like industry changers, you know. And I just think that right now the current education system isn't providing that.
TJ, thanks very much. Would you like to add to that?
So I think there were brilliant points made by the speakers, Naomi and TJ both, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, it's interesting, I had jotted down some similar points, and that's the fun of being on a panel which is so enlightened. I think for me, I need to ask a very basic question, which is, what's the purpose of education? What are we trying to achieve over here? Because whatever is the purpose of education, the curriculum always follows that. So at some point, the schools and colleges were basically manufacturing units. They were treated as manufacturing units, a mass production of skilled labor. And that is why the curriculum was dominated by what the industry needed. It didn't matter what the kids wanted or what was the need of the hour. It was the companies which were sponsoring those schools and those educational institutes. And they demanded skilled labor, and that's what the schools were providing. Are we creating good human beings as a result of that education? I mean, are we just interested in giving a degree, or are we interested in giving education? And if that question is answered, then the entire curriculum follows from there. Even today, there are schools and colleges with a difference. There are so many educators which are trying to do something different, because the basic question is, okay, of course, I want to equip my next generation for their livelihood and so that they can succeed in the real world. But some curriculum is timeless, right? So to teach kids how to share, about love, about trust, that does not depend on which century or which 2021 or millennials or whoever it is. That is timeless piece of education, which should be the focus. And of course, as time keeps moving, we keep giving new skills. But there's a head component and the heart component. And that's what TJ was talking about. Technology is an enabler, it can also be a huge disadvantage. I mean, research now says that more than 30% of young kids below the age of 20 are struggling with depression. How did they get there? How come they have access to the latest technology and amazing infrastructure the world over, and yet they're more and more unhappy? So this is something that goes back to the root question. What is the purpose of a school? What's the purpose of education? Why is there so much difference between the way parents raise their kids vis-a-vis what a school is expected to do? And are we looking at a school in isolation, or are we looking at all the spheres of influence? Peers and parents and social media. I mean, kids are learning more from YouTube than in the classroom. And who's to regulate that? Who's going to give them a sermon on moral values? Because there is unimaginable amount of content available on YouTube. So I think for me, it's going back to this whole question of what's the purpose of education, and then creating curriculum. Some of it is going to be timeless. Some of it, like fruits, curriculum has to be local and contextual. And like technology, curriculum has to be global. That is common sense. But asking the more difficult question on the purpose of education will help us create relevant curriculum.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's fascinating, especially about the timeless education, but also the point that you raised about autodidactic education. And that is a fact, isn't it? More people are teaching themselves online, choosing what they want to learn. Okay, another question, this time for TJ. Now, I know you're a proud school governor. How do you see the curriculum in your school as it stands, shaping students in a positive way?
I mean, I love the trust that I'm a governor in. I mean, the problem is that in our Western culture, we're so like fixated on ticking boxes, opposed to and making sure that we look good as a school, and make sure that we look good in Ofsted or league tables, or like as our country looks good on those world ranking tables, that we forget what the purpose of education, like Virat said, is, you know. And actually the point of education is making sure that we give every single child, or every single student, or every single young adult, or every single young person, whatever the way you want to see it, an opportunity in life, you know. It's not about ticking those boxes. And I feel like it's become more about ticking those boxes to make sure that you do what society expects you to do, instead of actually like trusting your teachers or your school, knowing what is best for your child or your young person, and actually doing what's best for them. You know, sometimes to the point where you almost have to compromise what's best for your young person, just to make sure that you don't go off what is expected of you. Like I play devil's advocate, and I pretty much argue everything that the CEO of the trust says, but in a respectful way, because I love my CEO, and I think she's amazing, and she does do everything that she can to give those students the best chance in life. But unfortunately, maths and English is such a priority that, like, if you don't do well with maths and English in primary school, you don't get into those higher sets. You don't do well at GCSE because you're not in those higher sets, because you have to do certain level worth of exams. And actually, who cares? Like, I'm not being funny, but like only a certain percentage of those pupils or students will actually go on and do math degrees, right? You need to know financial literacy. You need to know how to save up for a mortgage, how taxes work. All of that stuff is never taught to you. But yet you need to know quadratic equations when you're never going to do maths ever, you know? And actually, it really frustrates me, because like we don't teach students what's important. We talk about how important Shakespeare is for British culture, right? But we never teach them any politics. Like, where is the British culture in actually giving children an opportunity to really understand like how they can make the best opportunities for themselves, and actually like understand how the world works? We don't do that, you know. Like we're so fixated on this English curriculum that we think is meant to do all, like give these children an opportunity. It's an absolute load of rubbish. If I'm speaking quite frankly, like as in if I got taught how to become an entrepreneur, how to lead, like how to save up for a mortgage, how taxes work. Like, I mean, I would have not have worked for people for 10 years before I started my own business. I would have just jumped into starting my own business, because really and truly, the way that taxes work in the UK, you don't ever get a chance to actually get out of the rat race. Like, you are constantly stuck, because PAYE is something that I don't want to say on a live webinar, you know, like in the nicest way possible. I mean, we're so stuck in this rat race. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm a governor. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to challenge the system, and I'm trying to like challenge the CEO, and I push her boundaries. But she's awesome. Like she does everything she can within what she believes that she can do. As in, I'm just here to just tell her that, like, I don't really believe in the system.
Yeah, that's the great thing about being a governor. You can hold the leadership to account, and I'm sure that you do that really effectively. But your passion comes across. Virat, I was going to ask you, according to the UK Department for Education, progress in curricular terms means knowing more and remembering more. Do you think that's an adequate description of what success in the curriculum looks like?
Not really. I mean, academic success and real life success don't have direct correlations. So look at the top 50 business tycoons of the world. You'll rarely find an MBA grad from a Harvard over there. Look at the top technology innovations that have come in the last 20 years. You'll find dropouts from colleges leading those tech companies, right? So not that they're not intelligent, but the parameters to measure success in a regulated environment, which is, again, mass production of kids, 70, 100 kids in a class, they have to be graded on the same questions, does not allow you the freedom to individually grade people. In fact, a lot of colleges have something very funny. They have something called as relative grading. A lot of top T schools have relative grading. Relative grading basically means for me to succeed in my class, it's not enough that I do well. I succeed when others in my class do not do well. That's what relative grading is. So the whole preparation for me is not to share. It's about individualism versus being there for the society. So I have nothing against good colleges. I've always been a topper in my class. I studied in India. I studied in the US. I did my PhD. So I love the passion with which academic learning happens. But to say that if I were great in school, my chances of success in real life are high is definitely not true. So we really need to turn this around and again go back to, I think, I forget who, either Naomi or TJ said it, but what's the purpose of that child? I have friends who were in school, they were useless in school as far as the teachers were concerned. They were written off completely as the backbenchers. They're not going to do anything in their life. And today, those guys actually employ the toppers of the class. So there's a huge disparity over here on what real life success looks like and academic success looks like. Few of them have that in common, most don't. And the third dimension of what spiritual success looks like. On my deathbed, am I going to look back in my life and feel, oh, I should have worked for 1 more hour and made $1 million more? Or am I going to ask a completely different set of questions to myself? And at that point, will I feel my education has failed me? My teachers have failed me. Because although I was a success in the corporate world, I was an unhappy man. So I'm saying that without being very philosophical or ideological about it, we need to marry these things together. A reasonable amount of academic success prepares a child for sure. There is a lot of value in classroom learning. How does that meet the success on the street? And how does that meet the call of a human being for being a spiritually satisfied person? Can they come together? If not, somewhere we're missing the boat. Yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Naomi,
sorry, I know it's not my place to say. I know I'm just jumping in, and I'm not meant to really. But can I just add to what Virat said, because he said something really important about like those that don't do well academically and they employ certain people. But on the flip side, those students that are really intelligent, like in terms of street smart or like ways that they can make the best out of a situation, and actually they get written off, so they go through their whole life thinking that they're actually not good enough. You know, like we write off certain students, and it goes back to Albert Einstein saying, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, that fish will go through its whole life thinking it's stupid. You know, and we do that to so many children. Sorry, I just had to jump there. Sorry, Vera, you made a really good point.
TJ, Naomi, in your experience as a STEM innovation specialist, I'm not sure if that makes you a STEMinist, but what would you see as a broad and balanced curriculum? I know that STEM is your passion, so with that in mind, what would be your idea of a broad and balanced curriculum?
Okay, I have some more visual literacy points for you that I'd like to share. And it very much is my passion. I love it. I think I was born in the womb with this focus to lead and to inspire others with STEM. I grew up in Northeast Iowa, very, very rural and impoverished community. Nearest town was only 126 people. So my influence and my mentorship came from my father growing up on a dairy farm. And I learned how to drive tractors, chisel plow. By the time I was 9 years old, I was already milking 120 cows in a stanchion barn. So when you look back to where we were 40 years ago and how the technology has changed, that influence and those experience really cultivated a strong STEM growth mindset within me personally and my passion to share with others. So I want to take that passion on and to mentor and role model for girls that do not have the opportunity or do not have the access and the resources. And that is clearly the differentiator of when girls are in elementary, particularly, everyone is offered this beautiful thematic unit of study. Science and math and literacy and social studies and computer science is all interwoven. Yet when we go to middle school to high school, all of a sudden our curriculum becomes very disjointed, meaning that I have to go to math, I go to this room. I go to science, I go to this room. Everything is so separated. We need an inclusive thematic unit approach, actually K through 12, so that the kids can see the meaningfulness and connections that everything comes together of all content area. That's real life for our kids. So when we look at the teacher's role moving forward of how to empower more when it comes to STEM, the question I continually will come back to is, how do we unlock our students' human potential to engage and prepare them for their future of work and social emotional learning and their lifelong learning skills? And this is also important to boys as well. And again, it comes back, it's been mentioned so much already. We call CTE as curriculum technology education, but we also, it's inclusive of project-based learning and also teaching the SDGs. It's imperative in which to prepare our girls, especially for their next world. What we do know about the research, if more girls are provided the access and equity to the learning resources, it's going to continue to build their lifelong learning confidence. That confidence will carry over to pursue their purpose, their passion, and their goals in life. And that is, we have research proof on this. That's why it's so important that no matter what ability any child has in the classroom, the ones you talked about earlier, that could have been the ones that are off task, or the ones that are chatterbugs that can't stop talking, or the ones that are real quiet. We need to offer choice and voice in these types of learning experiences that are both digital and unplugged activity, because there's more opportunity to continue to network and to grow with those kids side by side and to learn from one another. Personalized learning we need to afford more of, and we're not doing a good enough job here in the United States. We need more opportunities for on-demand content that kids can learn through a learning playlist. We call them Polaroid notes. Think about a Polaroid picture, but a snapshot in learning, that give me that snapshot. I can learn with it, I can run with it, and then I can dig deeper into the content to pursue my interest. Different types of micro podcasting and blogs. But what makes us all inclusive and wholesome is when we can tie in the emotional intelligence known as EQ, the relationships and the mentoring opportunities for our girls. That's when the leadership opportunities open up. That's when the peer coaching amongst girls will feel like they can collaborate instead of compete against one another. And that's why I'm so passionate about this focus. The last thing I wanted to include is that we need more opportunities that we as women leaders and even male leaders need to be models to girls in order to share with them what it looks like to be a CEO of your own company. What does it look like to be a neuroscientist? And those are really diverse learning opportunities that more girls can see themselves as a resemblance of them, that look like them, that talk like them, to build that confidence to pursue their goals and their dreams. But we as teachers need to do a much better job to allow our children to be co-creators in the classroom with us. We need that personalized learning experience where kids feel empowered, that they own the learning and it's their job to come to the classroom, that they're part of the teaching environment and they can afford their knowledge to teach others. And again, the bigger picture, the future proofing, it's so important that our students feel like they have something to contribute, their value, their add. They can be a global solutionist to help us overcome our next pandemic. And that's why it's really important to include the design thinking approach. And the design thinking approach not only includes, as I mentioned before, the SDGs, but if you haven't seen this, this is a golden gem. This is a better than chocolate moment. I want to give a shout out to Ella Ben-Ur. She's an alum of MIT, and she's designed, which is a free tool to anybody, anywhere. It's called Innovator's Compass. It starts with that humanistic approach. Who's involved? How's it going to impact humanity? That when I'm creating something new, whether it's technology, whether it's just to solve for more efficiency of a solution, to be more productive, but she takes you through these design concepts of a design thinking approach, that it's all a collaborative approach, that we're in it to win it. And basically that we're going to solve some of our greatest challenges that are going to continually to face our children moving forward. Because if they're not into the buy-in of the upskilling, that lifelong learning, we need to find a way to encourage them to find their purpose, their passion, and their pursuit for happiness, that they will be a contributor of good in our world.
Naomi, thank you so much.
Okay, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased that you mentioned those early years as well. The pedagogy in kindergarten and foundation is obviously is often much more independent, and you see that. And I think TJ mentioned the fact that the self-regulation as well in those early years. But we're running out of time, and before we finish, I need to do two things. But firstly, I was desperate to, and this links to the last point, Virat, you had a wonderful quote when you said that when you were a child, you were a little bit of everything. You were a poet, a dancer, a student, a teacher, a leader, a scientist, a sportsman, and an actor. I think sometimes schools squeeze that enthusiasm out of their students, but it was that, I just wanted to tap into that surely this curriculum for the 21st century needs to respect all of those roles.
Yeah. And growing up is a process of leaving all those one by one and just becoming one, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the curriculum is basically focused on convergence. We have two mentalities, the convergence and the divergence. So most curriculum around the world, and I've studied in India and US and taught across the world, is very focused on convergence, meaning there's only one answer, there's only one way to do this, and it's at the back of your book and don't look. And that's where curriculum comes from. That's where exams come from, right? We want everybody to converge on one answer. The other way of thinking is divergence, that there are thousands of possibilities of the same problem. I can solve it in many different ways. And that's where divergent thinking comes in. And the more we encourage divergent thinking in a very scientific environment, then we really create people who can solve problems of today and of tomorrow. Because then the mind is open to think of thousands of possibilities. And there are many experiments done on this particular quality of divergent thinking and encouraging that in kids. And that's what I meant when I said that we need to have all these different roles. Of course, we can have one profession, that's fine. But you need to have the ability to think differently in any given situation. And that's what makes you a problem solver.
Yeah, thank you. So very briefly then, just as we finish, before we have some questions from the audience, I'd just like to ask each one of you for one idea and one sentence, if you can, on what each one of us could do tomorrow morning in our school to improve the curriculum. I'm going to start with TJ.
Oh, I wish you didn't ask me first. That's a really hard question. It's hard to pinpoint down to one thing. As if I could like change one thing, just let children make mistakes. Mm-hmm. I think that's where we make our biggest, that's where we learn our biggest life lessons, is when we make mistakes. And our school system is so focused on getting the right answer, doing the right thing and passing exams. And it almost feels like sometimes education is a destination opposed to a lifelong journey. And I just wish like we stop focusing on education, feeling that way, and allow children to make mistakes, because that is how they're going to grow.
Thank you very much, TJ. And Naomi?
What I would say, one thing to leave you on with, if you step inside your school tomorrow, what you need to change is we need to invite our children to the table. And it's called the Collaborative Shared Leadership Table, where children have a voice to help co-design and co-create their curriculum with teachers and administrators, so that we truly understand how they learn best, where they learn best, and why. They need critical input and insight to help drive our new creation, to reinvent education. Those kids are our futures, and we need to invest in them, and they need a voice to make the change.
Marvelous, Naomi. Thank you so much. Virat?
I would say introduce mind management and meditation as a part of the curriculum. Let the teachers and the students meditate together. 10 minutes is more than enough. We have done this across millions of students, thousands of schools across the world via the Art of Living Foundation, and the results are mind-blowing. So make mind management and meditation a part of the curriculum. That's what I would say.
Virat, thank you. And thank you to all of my speakers, TJ, Naomi, and Virat. Thank you for sharing your points. We're going to turn now to some questions, if we've got time, Sven, from our live audience.
Yes, we have time, and we have a couple of questions here, which I will read out. The first one is from Sophie Chapman. She's asking, there's a lot of talk about children finding their purpose, which sounds great, but could potentially be limiting. Would there not be greater flexibility in encouraging this idea of purpose to be embedded in learning itself, to get pleasure from the process of learning and discovery itself? I don't know, who wants to take this up?
As in, I will if nobody else wants to jump in. But ultimately, I don't think. I mean, I understand what the question is, but I think we're missing the point here. I mean, ultimately, like, I think, like, we're so fixated on like a destination and like a progressive system, like we forget to start backwards. I mean, like, where do you want to end up in 20, 30 years time? You know, like, I mean, I just feel like purpose is not about like knowing exactly what you want to do, but actually what you want people to remember you for, and actually what you want to do for society by the time you leave this world. You know, I think like we have a duty in education to for our children that have just been given the worst hand in history with the way that social media works, and the way that we just let them, like, we expect them to want social approval, and the way that they want these dopamines. I just think that we have a duty to make them feel as if they're more important than just like these materialistic figments of our imagination, you know? I hope that answers the question. I don't know if it does.
Anybody else wants to add to this?
I'll take that as it didn't answer the question.
That's okay. I'll just jump in.
Yeah, Naomi.
I added a link to the back channel chat, and I just think we need more opportunities to provide our students access and equity to experiences. It's those hands-on learning experiences. They don't even have to be technology related, but it's that we can model, we can mentor, we can guide, that you're really inspiring that child to help be the filter in which that they'll decide, yes, I like this activity, no, I don't, because it helps them make those decisions for a lifelong learning. Wonderopolis is a very creative little site. Every day there's a new wonder that comes up to inspire, to ignite the learning passion within students. It provides them choice. We need to find more ways to help our students identify what their purpose is, that they can contribute to that greater world of good.
Yeah, just but offering, yeah, more visions of the world, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Another question from Gerard Dumet.
I mean, it's not just that.
TJ, go ahead.
It's about helping them understand what's important to them, and what benefit that what's important to them in terms of what they feel that they can do to benefit society. It's about giving them a sense of purpose and understanding of, like, they're not just this person that's irrelevant to the world. It's about, like, they have an important voice and a contribution, you know, like Naomi said, it's about not just equality bringing them to the table, but it's equity, like giving them a voice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Another question about technology and income inequalities. How does current income inequalities affect arguments about tech supporting our lives? And what does inequality look like in the future? Who wants to jump in?
Sven?
How does current income inequalities affect arguments about tech supporting our lives? So I understand that obviously not everybody has same access to technology, right? Mm-hmm. And how will that look in the future? When supposedly we will use more technology, I guess. That's the question.
As an example, what happened this last year, we do know that the digital divide is alive. We know that, and it's not a good thing. And that inadequacy for children to gain access to the technology, where even children were not participating in school because they didn't have the access, they didn't have the resources. So thinking really on your feet quickly, what did we have to do to help provide these students some more STEM experiences? So we went back to almost maybe an old-fashioned protocol, we'll call it, but we went back to recycled items, found a STEM bag, a paper bag, and actually created really unique design challenges that most children would have recycled items somewhat in their home. If not, we put these STEM engineering bags together. The parents came through and picked them up. They had activities for months to do, and then kids came up with their own design challenges. We need to help our students really be innovators of their thinking and their learning, and the possibilities that, again, that they can contribute to design a solution that if they don't have the access, what can I do? Or what if, or how can I contribute if we did this? So it's a challenge all in itself, but at the same time, helping our kids be creative thinkers to help be that solutionist, to think, how do I solve for this problem? We're looking at broadband across the United States right now. So our new president has really taken that initiative to say, you know what, we need infrastructure. We need it for our kids. They are our future. So even our politicians need to be on the same page with our schools in which to support us through that infrastructure route. We're still behind in the US, yet at the same time, it's having those people that are in the power that coming back to schools to work to help us with that. And they're bringing to the table, high school students are part of this conversation about the infrastructure push now by the United States president. So again, I wish we've been doing this all along, but again, our kids had a back seat. They should be up there driving it at this time to help us find that visionary roadmap to help them be successful.
So,
sorry, Virat.
Go ahead, TJ, go ahead.
No, you go.
I'm just saying that I don't think technology is really going to be that difficult to provide. I mean, I'm in India and I see kids in rural cities having access to technology. It's cheap now. So access to technology won't be that big a problem. The problem is, what do you do once all these kids have that access to technology? Are you going to be able to tame that elephant that's going to go absolutely wild? Because to me, technological access is the easiest part of the problem. Broadband is going to become cheap. Internet is going to become cheap. The penetration of the internet is phenomenally increasing, even in the third world countries. So soon you will have, I mean, right now we have everybody on the same page with Zoom. Big deal. But how is that the solution? Giving everybody a technology-enabled platform. That's a part of the solution for sure. That's the first step. But I think the bigger question is that inequality going to disappear once inequality is a way of life? I mean, it could be in any different way, but time has shown again and again that inequality will exist in the world. How do I prep my kid to deal with that inequality and come out as a fighter and as a winner despite of that inequality is the bigger challenge. That's what I feel.
Thank you very much, Virat. TJ, you close the round and this round table.
Can I just play devil's advocate on everything, right? I think we're almost asking the wrong questions. I almost feel like being like without technology is actually going to be an advantage for some people because they'll have the human touch. In 10, 15 years time, 70% of the jobs we do now are going to be automated. So we need to have the human touch to be innovative, be creative, do something different. And it's going to be the level of understanding, compassion, love, like coming from a place of empathy, like emotional intelligence, like the human touch. That's what's going to give you the competitive edge. So I actually think in some respects, if you can become a human opposed to having technological equality, it's probably going to give you in some respects an advantage.
Perfect. Thank you very much. James, do you want to round this off? No, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. There's so much of this I've really enjoyed. All I was going to finish with is Professor Stephen Hepler, who's the closing keynote tomorrow, said that he tried a little experiment in a school, in a classroom near Madrid, where half the class pretended they were learning in the 2030s, and they had cardboard computers and curtains to separate the classroom. But he said that apparently the learning improved in that half of the class where they were pretending to be learning in the future and using and thinking in different ways. So there is so much truth in what's been said. I think some of it is down to the human side and some of it is the way that we use the technology.
Mhm.